Hello, Internet. It has been a while yet again. I have moved another time. I also just came back from work a couple of hours ago, so naturally, this video is about consulting, but I thought I would make it more dynamic by making tea first. And before I make my tea, the topic of this video is something that was maybe one of the biggest shocks to the system when I started in consulting. It's been about 5 or 6 months now, so it's been a decent chunk of time for me to acclimatize and get used to it and understand how everything works. And this is something that not many people speak about, but essentially in consulting, you're kind of expected to do 3 different types of work, but people only talk about one of them, which is client work. And there are actually 2 more. So I'm going to talk about that. But first, we'll choose a tea. And a piece of information that you do not need to know is that I am obsessed with tea, but I actually drink it very rarely. I don't know why. Do not question it, but we're gonna go for this one. If you are a dedicated viewer of this tiny little channel, you will remember my vlog from Moscow where I talked about my toxic relationship with coffee, which is that I love it, but I'm not sure how much of the love is actually love and how much is addiction and me just not functioning without it. So with tea, it's kind of a different type of a toxic relationship because I love tea and I get so excited when I see the tea aisle in supermarkets, and then I just go there and I'm like, oh my god, I'd love these 10 flavors into my collection. But then realistically in daily life, I probably drink tea maybe like once a week max, which is shocking. It is shocking. I don't know what happened there, but we're having it today. Aren't you lucky? You will also have to just deal with the fact that this mug says cappuccino, and I'm not sorry. So let's get into the actual topic. If this is one of the first videos you watch from me, then for a quick context recap, I started a new job in consulting in London about half a year ago, and I'm in one of the big 4 firms. So this is my experience, and from what I know, in all of the big 4 firms, I think across the world, but that might vary depending on the culture, there are 3 types of work that you are expected to do. They're incorporated into your performance reviews. They're kind of assumed as part of your role, but not many people talk about it because it's just such a weird thing. You don't get this in most other jobs. I'll go through the 3 and I'll tell you my experience and what I know so far. So number 1 is the most obvious one, and it's client work. It's your work on a project. It is pretty much what you would expect the whole job role to be. It's solving problems, usually as part of a team. The client comes to you and they have some sort of issue or they want some sort of strategy help to enable them to perform better, to go through a transformation, to build a long-term plan and see how they could match up to competitors or outdo them. Stuff like that is the bulk of consulting, and it's the client work which takes up most of your time, usually, but not always. Type of work number 2 that you're expected to do pretty much alongside client work all year round, maybe with some variations, is side of desk. And this was my main shock to the system because I was like, what do you mean I need to do all of that stuff alongside my client work, which is already taking up full time, all of my time? And while it's not really written in your contract explicitly, it's just one of those things that you find out when you get to the firm and they tell you what is expected of you, what the review process involves every year. And side of desk is essentially contributing to the firm internally in some form. You might be part of the onboarding team, for example. We have an analyst committee. It's the people who started on the graduate scheme 1 year before us or 2 years before us, and they help manage our cohort that started recently. There are also people who do events, there are people who do well-being initiatives, there are people who do diversity and inclusion initiatives, and people who work on maybe some sort of assets for a department to then reuse in project work. It's all sorts of stuff happening. But I guess the key point about this is all of that you're supposed to do on top of your client work. So you have to just kind of balance things around, and naturally you will have peaks and troughs in your client work. Sometimes it's really busy, sometimes it's a bit more relaxed, so you can fit a bit of time in of your side of desk work. Equally, sometimes people take on random bits of side of desk work, so it might not be something that you have to consistently contribute to. It might be just an initiative or two that you've picked along the way. In my case, for example, I have a few different bits that I'm on. One of them is kind of constant, but with various levels of business. I'm part of a communications team in my department. I'm also doing some one-off things throughout the year. So there is an event that I'm going to be part of. There's also another workshop that will be with a client, but for me, because I'm not part of that project, it will count as side of desk because I'm really interested in the industry. So things like that are the second type of work that you're supposed to be doing. Now, number 3 is something to do with sales and the nature of consulting, where partners and generally the senior leadership, their role essentially is to sell work to clients. So come to a company and you probably already have some sort of built relationship with them, and you say that here's this problem that we identified and we think we could help you in this way. How about we create a project out of it? That is, I guess, a simplified way of explaining how a project is sold. So sometimes there might be a team at work within consulting which is working on a bid. So it's something aims to sell work to a client. But obviously, because you're working on it now and a project is not guaranteed, you are kind of working for free. So in a way, you're not chargeable to the firm, and you're kind of working with the assumption of bringing more income in the future, in long term. That's another thing you're kind of expected to do, maybe not so strictly as the side of desk, because if there is chargeable work that you could be on, that will be prioritized by your resource manager and by HR generally, because that is the most obvious way for the firm to make money. However, if you are what is called on the bench, meaning that you're not on a client project at the moment and you're kind of free and you're just using your time maybe to do some learning, to do side of desk stuff until you get on the next project. In that case, you might be put on a bid, or you might want to contribute to one yourself in order to contribute to business development and generally the long-term profitability of your firm. So for me, I've already experienced all 3 types of work so far, and that's because my first project ended after 3-ish months for me. Alongside that, I was doing side of desk stuff. I now also found more bits and pieces to fit within that because I'm trying to get into media and entertainment as an industry. So I'm just picking some things up that are really interesting to me and that are non-chargeable and additional to potential client work that will hopefully bring me closer to getting into that niche area within consulting. And also now, because I am on the bench, I got onto 2 bids as well, but it's not a project yet. It's just us trying to sell work to them. So those are the 3 types of work you're expected to do within consulting, and it will be to various degrees depending on your grade as well. For example, for analysts, which is what I am, the most obvious ones are client work and side of desk. I think bids are a bit more dependent on the circumstances and how much project work you have going on, if you're on the bench or not at all. When it comes to more senior grades, I feel like bid work becomes more a part of your role description because eventually partners sell work. So that's kind of your progression and how you go from doing the manual things like, oh, let me build the slide deck for the client, to then aiming to have a conversation with the client to convince them to even take on a project and buy work of a consulting firm. That's the summary, and maybe it was rambly, but I hope it was helpful. If you are just joining consulting or if you're thinking of going to consulting, this is something to bear in mind just because it is such an odd setup. And it definitely wasn't something that I knew ahead of time. I heard of side of desk, but I didn't really know how it all works. So hopefully that sheds some light. If you have any questions on this, please let me know in the comments. If you have any other topics you're interested in, equally do let me know because there's so much more to cover about consulting. And I hope you have a lovely week and I'll see you very soon. Bye.